Good day, people. We're here to talk about the barrier concept. Okay, so the barrier concept has three subdivisions. Those three subdivisions are the direct barrier, aka the barrier of bind or the direction of bind, the indirect barrier, which is considered the direction of ease or direction of preference, and then you'll also get the balance barrier, which really isn't a barrier, but the point of balance is some theoretical point between direct and indirect. Now, before we go any further, we need to flesh out just a couple concepts to make this make a little bit more sense. We have the physiological barrier, which is the distance that a person is able to actively move. So the term physiological in this case meaning what the person is able to produce, right? Through neurology, through the endocrine system, through muscular tension, through the tension of other conjoined soft tissues. That all comes into the concept of the physiological barrier. So how far a person can move themselves. We have then the anatomical barrier. The anatomical barrier is the absolute end range before there's disruption to soft tissue elements. So it's as far as you can go before something gets torn. In between the physiological barrier and the anatomical barrier is what would often be termed the elastic barrier. Okay. That is where most osteopathic practitioners are going to work. Okay, so the physiological barrier is actually one of the better ways to think about the direct barrier. So if I can move my neck this far to the right and this far to the left, then the direction of bind is to the right, the direction of ease is to the left. Okay? So as far as going to the left, my physiological capacity, my physiological barrier actually gets me quite close to my anatomical barrier, the anatomical end range. Going to the right, so if this is how far I can go to the left, and this is how far I can go to the right, then what we have is my physiological barrier on the right is very, very short of the anatomical barrier. So the range in between where the distance that I can go to the right and the distance that I should be able to go, or I anatomically have the capacity to go, is where that direct bind lives, where that direct barrier lives. So what we're trying to do is to get the physiological barrier and the anatomical barrier, relatively speaking, closer to one another. We don't ever want to challenge the anatomical barrier. The reason we don't want to challenge the anatomical barrier is because if we make a mistake, something might tear, something might break. So we don't go there. We always go short of anatomical barrier to the best of our capacity. So to bring it all back together, what we want to talk about is direct, which is the direction of bind here, the direction of ease or indirect, which is over here in this theoretical case, because my neck can move quite a bit better than that, but I just want to do this to demonstrate it. Then we want to talk about the balance point. So the balance point is very much a fleeting thing. It's something that people speak about, but it's more of a theoretical thing than something that's actually easy to achieve clinically. So as far as the balance point, what you're looking for is essentially any point in between the indirect barrier and the direct barrier where essentially all things come off of tension. So the patient is able to relax fully, all tissues are able to passively relax. You will hear people clinically speaking or clinically describing this balance point as the point where everything floats. Now the term everything floats essentially means that everything gets soft, everything goes off tension, the person doesn't fight, there's no reflex activity palpable or notable, they just kind of relax. Now exactly where is that? Well, mathematically you would try to assume that it's immediately between, or kind of the halfway point between the direct bind and the indirect barrier. Okay? But it doesn't necessarily seem to be that. It's just something that you have to test, you have to look for. That's why I say it's a fleeting thing. Okay? So just to recap, the direct barrier is the direction of bind. That's what we're trying to change. We're trying to bring the physiological endpoint, the point that I can move to, closer to the anatomical endpoint, but we don't challenge the anatomical endpoint when looking at the direct barrier. So the direct barrier is here. This is as far as I can go for whatever number of reasons, and this is how far I should be able to go. We're trying to bring those closer together. The indirect barrier is the direction of ease, the direction of preference. It's easy for me to go that way. Where I stop actively is very close to the anatomical end range. And again, we don't challenge that. The balance point being some point theoretically in between those two that you have to find through palpation. Okay? So what we've done is we've just had a very general overall talk about the barrier concept and a general demonstration Over time, in all of the videos that you will find after this, what we're going to do is we're going to use those terms, so the direct barrier, the indirect barrier, balanced, more so when we're looking at technical approaches and kind of nitty-gritty stuff. But I just want you to have something to come back to, so that if some concept is unclear when I say we're going to go to the direct barrier or the indirect barrier, or we're going to do things of those nature, that you have something to come back to as a touchstone of as essentially a guideline. Now, this is a general guideline. There's more information to be brought out over time, but that often ends up being more demonstrable when we're actually looking at work with a patient. So we will go ahead and do that over time.